In the Impact segment tonight, on Thursday night, a gunman killed a police officer and wounded 3 others on one of Paris's most famous streets, forcing an early end to campaigning for France's presidential election, which was scheduled for Sunday. President Trump weighed in on the matter this morning, tweeting, "Another terrorist attack in Paris. The people of France will not take much more of this. Will have a big effect on the presidential election." But in France, where a presidential election will be held on Sunday, one of these centrist candidates seemed resigned to it, saying, quote, this threat will be a fact of daily life in the coming years. Joining us now with the latest, Fox News chief Washington correspondent James Rosen. So, James, I got to ask you, has there been any update in this crime? Is there a second suspect out there, or are they assuming it's just one guy?
For the moment, it seems like all of the efforts are focused on learning more about the one guy who was shot while trying to escape after he killed the police officer and shot 3 other people. And out tumbled from his body, we learned from the French authorities today, after he was shot, a note in which he had words of praise for Daesh, or ISIS as we call it here. So there's every indication this was a terrorist event, Greg. Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say. Is it something where it's likely that ISIS claims something after the fact, that he was not, they had not executed this, but they had inspired it?
Right, and that serves their propaganda purposes. And we've seen in a number of cases where ISIS has claimed credit or some sort of affinity with one of these individuals who's involved in this kind of atrocity, whether or not, in fact, really ISIS had anything directly to do with that individual. It was an interesting comment, though, that you just mentioned from Emmanuel Macron, the centrist candidate in the French presidential election, when he basically indicated that this is the new normal, that we're going to have to acclimate ourselves to these kind of events for the foreseeable future. That's not, generally speaking, a winning posture for candidates, but it does remind me of an incredibly brilliant cartoon that ran in the New Yorker right after 9/11. It showed the classic evolutionary sequence where there's like a sort of a primordial ooze and there's a fish that rises from it, and then it starts to walk on 2 legs, and then it starts to walk upright. The last panel in this sequence in the New Yorker cartoon showed a man in a suit and tie carrying a briefcase and walking through a magnetometer, as if to say this kind of thing post 9/11 is with us here to stay in some respect.
Thank you, James, for explaining an entire cartoon to our audience. No, but I do agree. I don't think the candidate was being, I think he was just being honest about the nature of the world. And it might hurt him. But anyway, James, thank you. Now for more analysis, Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, who joins us from Washington. So, Colonel Peters, what is your take on the terror attack in Paris, and will it have an effect on the election, and also, should it have an effect?
Well, first of all, with the statement by Macron that this is the new normal, you know, Greg, we should hammer politicians when they tell us lies, but we shouldn't hammer them when they tell the truth.
Right.
And the politicians in Europe and here who have been saying this is here and it's not going away fast are telling the truth, because the civilization of Islam in the Middle East has collapsed into barbarity, has spread to Europe. It touches us here, and it's not going to be solved for decades, if at all. So will it affect the French election? It may affect the first round. It may garner some more votes from Marine Le Pen, who is an absolute far-right nutcase.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, any American conservative who thinks Marine Le Pen, who takes loans from Vladimir Putin, praises Russia, wants out of the EU and out of NATO, is America's friend, isn't doing his or her homework. But at any rate, the bottom line is this. We have to fight terrorism every single day. I want every terrorist dead. But the reality is, unless we want to turn our societies into police states, forbid people from driving cars, forbid people from owning weapons, you're going to have these small-scale attacks because they're so easy to stage. They turn our freedoms against us, and unfortunately, there is going to be a price we have to pay.
Right, and the small-scale attacks are becoming more prevalent, perhaps because we're becoming better at stopping the larger scale ones. And so it's a weird thing to think that, okay, maybe this is an improvement, even though it's horrible. But my worry is it only takes one, and as you see a marriage of technology to terror, and it's not going to be a car. It's going to be a drone that you could send away for, an anthrax, or it could be smallpox if the guy's a doctor. So it worries me that there is going to be an evolution towards a more devastating style of attack in the coming years that will make this stuff look kind of small?
That's important because our enemies are often ingenious. We've seen ISIS and before them Al-Qaeda do some brilliant things. I mean, the complex aerial ballet of 9/11 using our common tools against us was brilliant. So yes, we have to be prepared. At the same time, we can't live in fear.
Right.
And we have to recognize the fact that, as you said, we've gotten very good at taking down the big plots. Now the problem are the jailbird converts, the sudden converts, as this guy in Paris seems to be.
Right.
And I do remind people that I have no sympathy with terror. I want those suckers dead, dead, dead. At the same time, as far as the threat from Islamist terror goes, since 9/11, Latino gangs from Central America and Mexico have killed vastly more people on our soil, and they're terrorists too.
But the distinction is that there's one group that has an existential desire to end the planet. The gangs, they want to sell drugs, make money, but Islamic radicals, they want to take everybody to their heaven.
At first, I thought you were talking about the pharmaceutical industry, yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. I've been on this for a very long time. Those with an apocalyptic vision, as we see with ISIS and the end of times battles that's going to end now in Deir ez-Zor, it's changed a couple times. They're an incredibly committed opponent. Their great strength is their commitment to their cause, their belief, which is why, and they have no reverse gear. You can't unconvert them. What you've got to do is kill them, and we're going to have to keep on killing them for a very long time.
Yeah, and the issue which you bring up of sudden converts, it's ISIS doesn't execute; it now inspires. They're essentially like a rock band that has hundreds of tribute bands who ape their every move wherever they go. So they could just take they could take credit for this when they weren't anywhere around. And I do think that you can be vigilant without curtailing freedoms. I don't think it's an either-or choice. Again, we become a prisoner of two ideas. You're not losing freedom. You're actually preserving freedom by heightening security, being smarter.
Well, sure, but, in tight and smart ways.
Yeah.
But as long as we've got a global left and an American left that sympathizes with the terrorists and is worried about their rights, you're just not going to make the progress because, unfortunately, some civil rights do have to be slightly impinged, such as at airports, to keep us safe. But we all just need to be sane and tough.
Right. Ralph, always informative when you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg.
The New York Times